am Laura, age 25. When people hear that I'm a lawyer now, they often imagine a confident woman in heels and a pressed suit, maybe walking into a courtroom with files under her arm and certainty in her steps. They picture success, stability, respect. But if they could have seen me just 1 year ago, standing on the front porch of my parents' house with a single suitcase, holding my law degree folder in one hand and trying to keep myself from shaking, they would have seen something entirely different. That night, I realized how fast love can turn into shame in the eyes of people who once called you family. It was supposed to be a happy evening, my first family dinner after finishing law school. I hadn't been home in almost 3 years. Between classes, part-time work, and internships, I barely had time to breathe, let alone travel. So when my mother texted me saying, "Come home. We'll all have dinner together. Everyone wants to see you," I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. I imagined laughter, my little cousins asking me questions about college, my dad teasing me about how I always fell asleep during long family movies. I even thought maybe my parents would finally say, "We're proud of you, Laura." Because despite everything, all the distance, all the arguments, I still wanted that. I still wanted to belong, but nothing about that evening went as I imagined. I arrived a few minutes before dinner, carrying more than just my suitcase. I was 4 months pregnant. The pregnancy wasn't planned, but it wasn't something I regretted either. It was complicated, like life often is. The man involved was someone I deeply respected, though we were not married. He was someone who had stood by me when I was struggling through my final year of law school. Someone who didn't judge me when I was barely keeping myself together. I thought I'd tell my family about it gently after dinner. I didn't want it to be a secret, but I also didn't want to make a scene. As I walked in, the house looked almost the same. The same photo frames on the walls, the same faint smell of cinnamon my mother always loved. But the air felt different, tense, cautious. My father barely looked up from his chair when I entered. My mother smiled politely, but there was something forced about it. My younger brother Daniel stood up and hugged me. He was the only one who seemed genuinely happy to see me. "Laura, you look grown up," he said awkwardly, and I laughed. That small moment gave me hope that maybe the evening would still go well. Dinner started quietly. My mother had made my favorite, roast chicken with lemon butter sauce. I was about to thank her when she looked at me and asked, "So how was law school?" I smiled and began talking about my graduation, about how challenging it was, how I had been offered an internship at a small firm in the city. My father didn't respond. He just kept cutting his meat in silence. I could feel the tension rising, though I couldn't understand why. And then, as I shifted slightly in my chair, my loose coat moved, revealing the small curve of my belly. My mother's fork froze midair. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. My father noticed too, and the air in the room became painfully still. He leaned back, staring at me with an expression I'll never forget. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked coldly. I hesitated. "Dad, I was going to tell you, don't call me that right now," he snapped. "Answer the question." I swallowed hard. "Yes, I'm pregnant." For a second there was silence. Then came the storm. "You're a disgrace," he shouted, standing up so suddenly that his chair fell backward. "You've brought shame to this family. After everything we did for you, the money, the sacrifices, this is what you come home with?" "Dad, please," I said softly. "It's not like that." "You don't even know—" "Don't!" he cut me off. "Don't you dare try to justify this." I turned to my mother, hoping for some kindness, but her face was cold. "You chose failure, Laura," she said. "You made your bed, now sleep on it. On the streets if you have to. You're no longer welcome here." Her words hit harder than I thought words could. My throat went dry. I wanted to explain, to tell them everything. That the baby's father wasn't some random man, that there was more to the story, that I was still their daughter. But they didn't give me a chance. My father pointed toward the door. "Leave, right now, before I lose whatever respect I have left for you." I remember standing up slowly, my legs trembling. My brother tried to speak up. "Dad, come on, you can't." But my father's glare silenced him, so I walked out, just like that. No hugs, no goodbyes. Only silence and shame following me out the door. Outside, the night air was cold. I stood under the porch light, holding my suitcase, staring at the door that had just closed behind me. I felt small, smaller than I had ever felt. I didn't have anywhere to go that night. My apartment lease had ended when I moved back for a short break. I thought I'd stay home for a while before finding a new place in the city, but now I was standing in front of my childhood home, rejected and alone, with nowhere to sleep. I ended up at a small motel a few miles away. It wasn't much. A narrow bed, thin walls, and a flickering light that buzzed all night. But it was all I could afford. That night, I cried quietly. Not because I was ashamed, but because I had lost something I didn't realize I was still clinging to. The idea that my family would always be there, no matter what. Over the next few days, I tried to focus on practical things. I called my old classmate Maya, who worked at a law office in town. She offered me a temporary desk job to help me get back on my feet. I found a small apartment, barely big enough for one person, but at least it was mine. I told myself I could rebuild. I always had. But every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the same thought reflected in my eyes. How easily my parents had thrown me away. And something inside me began to change. At first, I told myself I didn't need them, that I'd prove them wrong. But as the weeks went by, that quiet determination grew into something sharper. Not hatred, exactly, but a deep, calm kind of revenge. Not the kind that screams or destroys, but the kind that rebuilds in silence, waiting for truth to surface on its own. Because I knew something they didn't know. The man they called a mistake, the father of my child, wasn't just anyone. He was someone they respected deeply. Someone who held a kind of power they valued more than love itself. But I decided not to tell them yet. Let them believe what they wanted. Let them look down on me. Because sometimes silence can be the most elegant form of revenge. A week passed. Then another. I focused on my work, trying to stay quiet and unseen. Maya's firm handled a lot of family and corporate cases, and though my role was mostly paperwork at first, I started to notice how much influence our clients carried in town. One afternoon, as I was filing documents, Maya walked up to me smiling. "Guess who's coming in for a consultation today?" I shrugged. "No idea." "Richard Parker," she said. The name sent a small jolt through me. Richard Parker, my baby's father. He was a senior partner at a major firm in the city, and also one of the firm's biggest clients. He had helped me during my internship, not romantically at first. He was my mentor, intelligent, composed, and kind. Our relationship had evolved slowly, carefully. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't an accident. When he walked into the office that day and saw me sitting there, his expression softened instantly. "Laura," he said quietly, "I've been trying to reach you." I nodded. "I know, I just needed time." He looked at me with understanding. "Are you okay?" I smiled faintly. "I will be." We talked privately for a while. He told me he wanted to support me and the baby no matter what. He didn't care what anyone thought. That reassurance, that calm, steady loyalty, made me feel grounded again. And then he told me something that made my heart skip a beat. He had been invited to a community dinner next week, hosted by none other than my parents' company. My father was the local legal advisor for a chain of family-owned businesses, and Richard's firm had recently signed a partnership with them. In other words, they were about to meet, but not the way they expected. I didn't plan to reveal everything right away. I wanted the truth to arrive naturally, like a quiet wave that starts small and ends up reshaping the entire shore. For now, I stayed calm, polite, invisible, but deep down, I knew the moment was coming, the moment they would learn who I had disgraced myself with. And when they did, I wouldn't need to shout or seek revenge with cruelty. Their own hypocrisy would do the work for me. That night, as I lay in bed, I rested my hand gently on my stomach. "We're going to be okay," I whispered. "They threw us out, but we'll give them something they can never take back. Peace on our terms. And truth they'll never forget." I closed my eyes calm, steady, because revenge, the the kind that doesn't burn but rebuilds, had already begun. When I woke up the next morning, the world outside my small apartment felt strangely still. The city hummed faintly through the thin walls, and sunlight slipped through the curtains in tired streaks. I had always liked mornings. They made me feel like life still had time to make sense. But that morning, I felt something else. A quiet certainty that my life was already changing shape. The day after Richard told me about the dinner my parents were hosting, I couldn't stop thinking about it. For years, my family's world had revolved around appearances, who they knew, where they went, how others saw them. My father was respected in town. People saw him as a strong, disciplined man, someone who held firm values. My mother was the soft-spoken counterpart, the graceful woman who held her head high even when others lowered theirs. Together, they built a reputation that mattered more to them than love, understanding, or compassion. And that was exactly why their rejection had cut so deep. But it was also why I knew what would hurt them most. Not screaming or vengeance, but the quiet collapse of the illusion they had spent a lifetime building. Richard and I met again later that week. He was sitting at a cafe downtown when I arrived, reading over a few case notes. He looked up and smiled when he saw me, that calm, patient smile that had drawn me to him in the first place. "How are you feeling today?" he asked gently. I took a deep breath. Better, still. Nervous. He closed his folder and leaned back. "Laura, I know this isn't how you planned things, but you've handled it better than most people ever could. And if your family can't see that, it's their loss." His words settled over me like a blanket, warm, grounding. I smiled faintly. "They'll know soon enough," I said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. "You want me to tell them?" I shook my head. "No, not yet. I want them to find out naturally. I want them to hear your name, see your face, and realize everything they threw away. I don't want to prove anything with words. I just want the truth to stand on its own." He nodded slowly, understanding. That was one of the things I appreciated most about Richard. He never rushed me. He understood that sometimes silence carried more power than confrontation. Over the next few days, I worked at the firm as usual, doing my job quietly and efficiently. Maya noticed something different about me, though, a kind of stillness, a calm confidence that hadn't been there before. "You seem lighter," she said one afternoon. "Maybe I am," I replied, smiling. Sometimes peace comes when you stop trying to explain yourself. The following week, the dinner took place. It wasn't a family dinner this time. It was a professional event, a partnership celebration between my father's business network and Richard's law firm. It was held at one of the nicest hotels in the city, the kind of place my parents loved to be seen in. All chandeliers, linen tablecloths, and carefully chosen smiles. Richard had invited me to come along, but I declined. "Not yet," I told him. "Let them meet you first. Let them talk about how respectable you are, how successful, how trustworthy. Let them admire you before they know who I am to you." He smiled knowingly. "You're really something, Laura." "Just patient," I said. Patience is its own kind of revenge. The night of the event, I stayed home, curled up on my couch, a cup of tea in my hands. I imagined the scene unfolding. My father shaking Richard's hand, my mother smiling politely, both of them completely unaware of the connection. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from Richard. "Your parents were there. The dinner went well. Your father spoke to me for a while. I think he liked me. He even mentioned something about hoping I'd take on more local cases." I laughed softly to myself when I read it. The irony was almost too perfect. For the next week, I said nothing. I just continued with my work, focusing on building my small life, organizing baby appointments, working on small cases, saving what little I could. But beneath that calm routine, I could feel something building. Not tension exactly, but the quiet pressure of truth waiting to surface. Then, one evening, I got a call from my mother. Her number flashed on my screen, and for a moment, I considered ignoring it. But something in me, maybe curiosity, Maybe that old longing for closure made me answer. Hello? There was a pause. Then her voice cool and careful. Laura. Mom. Another pause. Then she said, We met someone recently. A lawyer named Richard Parker. He said he knows you. I took a breath, keeping my tone neutral. Yes. He was my mentor during my final year. I see. Her voice had that strained politeness she used when she didn't know what to feel. He's quite respectable, very intelligent man. Your father was impressed. I could hear it. The hesitation, the curiosity under her words. I almost smiled. That's good, I said quietly. He's been very kind to me. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then softly, Laura, is he the father? There it was. The question she'd been dancing around. I didn't answer immediately. I wanted to choose my words carefully. Not to hurt, but to let the truth speak clearly. Yes, I said finally. He is. For a long time there was silence. I could almost hear her trying to process it. I could picture her sitting in the kitchen, her hand on her forehead, realizing the full weight of what she and my father had done. When she spoke again, her voice trembled slightly. Why didn't you tell us? I took a slow breath. Would it have mattered? She didn't answer. Mom, you and Dad didn't even give me a chance to explain. You saw me, decided I was a disgrace, and threw me out. You didn't ask who or why or how. You just assumed the worst. And now that you know it's someone you respect, suddenly it matters. Her breathing grew uneven on the other end. It's not like that. It is, I said quietly. You cared more about appearances than truth. More about how others saw you than how your daughter felt. There was another pause. Then softly. Your father doesn't know yet. Please, don't tell him. I'll talk to him first. I didn't respond. That night, I sat by my window, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. I felt calm. Not triumphant, not angry, I'm just calm. Because I knew the truth had finally entered their perfect little world. A few days later, my father called. His voice was unusually quiet. Laura, I owe you an apology. I didn't speak. I just let him continue. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what kind of man he was. I almost laughed at that. So if it had been someone else, you'd still think I was a disgrace? He didn't answer. He sighed heavily. We made a mistake. Your mother and I, we acted out of anger. I looked down at my hand resting on my growing belly. You didn't act out of anger, Dad. You acted out of pride. There's a difference. Silence again. Then he said quietly, Can we see you? Please? I didn't say yes right away. I'll think about it. I could almost hear the guilt breathing on the other side of the line. When he hung up, I sat there for a long time, feeling an odd mix of sadness and peace. Because this quiet unraveling, was exactly what I wanted. They were realizing that respect doesn't erase cruelty. That their judgment, once spoken, couldn't be taken back just because the truth was convenient now. Over the next few weeks, they reached out more often. My mother sent me messages asking how I was feeling, if I needed help, if I wanted to come home. My father even offered to arrange something for the baby. I thanked them, politely but distantly. I wasn't interested in revenge that left wounds. I wanted them to sit with what they'd done, to face the reflection of themselves in silence. And that's what they did. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. My father showed up at the law firm. Maya called me into the lobby, her eyes wide. Laura, there's someone here asking for you. When I saw him, standing there in his crisp suit, looking tired and older than I remembered, my heart clenched. For a second, I was that girl again. The one who had walked out of the house with a suitcase and shame. Dad, I said quietly. Laura. He looked at me with eyes full of regret. I came to see you, not as a father demanding anything, just as a man who knows he failed. I said nothing. He took a slow breath. I met Richard again today. He told me everything. About the baby, about how hard you've been working. He said you refused to take any help from him or anyone else. I nodded slowly. That's true? He looked down. I don't deserve to ask for your forgiveness. But I want you to know, I'm proud of you. I should have been proud from the beginning. It was strange, hearing those words that I had dreamed of for years. But they didn't feel like victory. They felt like quiet closure. I smiled softly. "Thank you, Dad." He hesitated. "Will you come home for dinner sometime?" "No pressure, just dinner." I looked at him carefully, then said, "Maybe one day, but not yet. I'm still building something of my own." He nodded, eyes glistening slightly. "I understand." As he walked away, I realized my revenge was complete, and it hadn't required cruelty, shouting, or even confrontation. It had required patience, because sometimes the calmest revenge is simply living well while others face the echo of their own choices. That night, I stood by my window again, the same one where I had once whispered to my unborn child that we would be okay. I rested my hand on my belly and smiled. We were more than okay. We had found peace. And peace, I had learned, can be the sharpest revenge of all. When people say time heals, I think they forget to mention that time doesn't heal by itself. You heal when you decide to stop reopening old wounds, when you stop waiting for the people who hurt you to make it right. I had learned that lesson the hard way. After my father's visit, something in me shifted. I wasn't angry anymore, not even bitter. I was simply free. Free from the need to be accepted. Free from the hope that my parents would change into something they weren't ready to be. A few weeks later, I gave birth to a baby boy. I named him Noah. It was the middle of spring, a quiet, rainy morning. The kind of day where the world feels half awake and soft. The hospital room was small, the air filled with the faint smell of disinfectant and rain-soaked soil drifting in through the window. When I first held him, everything, the pain, the rejection, the loneliness, melted away. He was perfect. Small fingers, dark eyes, a calm expression that reminded me of Richard. I remember whispering, "You and I were going to have a peaceful life." Richard was there, holding my hand the whole time. He wasn't the loud, dramatic type. He didn't flood me with promises. He just stayed beside me, quietly, with a steady presence that made me feel safe. When the nurse placed Noah in his arms for the first time, he looked at him with such tenderness that I almost cried. "He's got your eyes," he said softly. "No," I smiled faintly. "He's got your calm." Those first few months were a blur of exhaustion and wonder. Sleepless nights, endless feedings, moments where I wasn't sure if I was doing anything right. But even when I felt lost, there was a part of me that was grounded, knowing that I was building a life not from what I'd lost, but from what I was creating anew. My parents didn't visit at first. I wasn't surprised. They sent gifts through my mother's friend, small things, like a baby blanket or a set of bottles, accompanied by notes written in her careful handwriting. For the baby, one of them read, "Not for me, just for him." Still, I accepted them politely. I didn't send them back. I didn't write back either. It wasn't coldness, it was boundaries. I had finally learned the difference. By the time Noah turned 6 months old, my career had started to pick up. I had been promoted at the firm, not because of favors, not because of Richard, but because I worked harder than anyone else. I spent late nights drafting cases, quietly proving myself in ways words couldn't. Richard's firm was growing fast, and though we were no longer working directly together, he often consulted me on small projects. Our relationship had settled into something steady and respectful, not defined by drama or public gestures, but by quiet understanding. One evening, after putting Noah to sleep, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures from law school, from family gatherings years ago. Faces smiling, unaware of the fractures that would one day divide them. It made me wonder how easily love can get buried under expectations. My parents didn't stop loving me. I don't think they ever did. They just loved their image of me more than the real me, and when those two didn't match, they chose the image. But time has a way of humbling even the proudest hearts. A few months later, I got a call from my brother Daniel. We hadn't spoken much since that night. He had moved to another city for work, trying to stay neutral in the family tension. When I answered, I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "Hey, Laura. How are you?" "I'm good, you?" "I'm okay, listen. Mom's not doing too well." I froze. "What do you mean?" "She's fine physically," he said quickly. "It's more emotional. She hasn't been herself. She keeps talking about you, about Noah. She feels guilty." I took a slow breath. "I see. She asked if she could come see you, just once. She doesn't expect you to forgive her. She wants to see her grandson." I didn't answer immediately. Part of me wanted to say no, to protect the peace I had worked so hard to build. But another part, the part that had healed enough to be strong, whispered that maybe letting her see him wasn't about forgiveness or weakness. It was about closure. So, I agreed. A week later, she came to visit. When I opened the door, she stood there holding a small bag of gifts, her eyes red and tired. She looked older, smaller somehow, as if the weight of her own pride had finally started to crush her. "Hi, Mom," I said quietly. "Laura." Her voice cracked a little. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." For a moment, neither of us knew what to say. Then I stepped aside and gestured for her to come in. She looked around the apartment. The toys scattered across the floor, the baby book stacked on the shelf, and smiled faintly. When she saw Noah, sleeping peacefully in his crib, she covered her mouth with her hand. Tears welled up instantly. She walked closer, slowly, as if afraid to disturb him. "He's perfect," she whispered. I nodded. "He's calm. Never cries without a reason." She looked at me then, her eyes full of regret. "I'm so sorry, Laura. I don't expect you to forget what we did. I just need you to know. Every day since that night, I've replayed it in my head. I keep thinking, what kind of mother turns her daughter away like that?" Her voice broke. I was angry, yes, but mostly I was scared. Scared of what people would say, scared of losing our reputation. I didn't realize I was losing something far more precious. For a moment, I didn't speak. I just looked at her. This woman who had raised me, who had also hurt me more deeply than anyone else. "Mom," I said softly, "I'm not angry anymore. But I can't forget. What you said that night, it changed me. It made me stronger, yes, but it also made me stop expecting softness from the people I love." She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I deserve that, but maybe one day we can start again, not as before, but better." I smiled faintly. "Maybe." Before she left, she kissed Noah's forehead gently. Then she turned to me and said something I'll never forget. "You didn't get your revenge by shouting, Laura. You got it by surviving. By living in peace. I see that now." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. After she left, I stood by the window, holding Noah in my arms. The rain had started again, light and rhythmic against the glass. I thought about how strange life could be, how the same house that once threw me out could one day be filled with regret. But I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. Not the kind that burns. I wanted something deeper. Redemption through peace. The months passed, and I built something that resembled a life I once dreamed of. My small apartment became a home, filled with laughter, toys, and the quiet chaos of motherhood. My job became more demanding, but also more fulfilling. I started taking small cases for single mothers, helping women who had been dismissed or judged, just like I once was. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I knew what it felt like to have doors closed on you when you needed them most. Sometimes I'd get messages from my father, too. Cautious, polite ones. He would ask about Noah or tell me about his work. Each message ended the same way. "Proud of you." I'd smile when I read them, but I rarely replied. I wasn't being cruel. I was simply at peace. Some distances don't need to be closed. They just need to stop hurting. One afternoon, while at work, my boss called me into her office. "Laura, there's a big case coming in," she said. "Corporate property dispute. The client specifically asked for you." When I looked at the file, my breath caught. It was one of my father's business associates, the same network he used to manage contracts for. For a moment, I wasn't sure whether to take it. It felt too close to the past, but then I reminded myself I didn't run from the past anymore. I had built something beyond it. I accepted the case. During the hearing, my father was there, sitting quietly behind the client's bench. When our eyes met, he smiled faintly, not with pride this time, but with something gentler, respect. After the hearing ended, he walked up to me. "You were incredible in there," he said quietly. "Thank you." He hesitated. "I told everyone you were my daughter." I looked at him, surprised. "You did?" "Yes," he said, "because I'm done hiding behind pride. You're the best thing I ever did, Laura." I didn't know what to say, so I simply nodded. That night, after putting Noah to bed, I sat by the window again. The city lights shimmered below, steady and warm. I thought about everything, the shame, the silence, the soft revenge that came not through anger, but through growth. Peace had come to me slowly, quietly, one act of self-respect at a time. Sometimes, I still thought about that night years ago, the one where my father told me I was no longer welcome. But now, when I remembered it, I didn't feel pain. I felt gratitude, because that night had pushed me out of a world where love was conditional, and into a life where love began with myself. As Noah stirred softly in his crib, I whispered, "You'll never have to earn love, my boy. You'll just have it." And maybe that was my real revenge, breaking the cycle, choosing peace over pride, choosing growth over pain. Because in the end, calm revenge isn't about making others suffer. It's about living so well that they have to confront the weight of their own cruelty, while you stand, unshaken, on the other side. When I walked into the hospital that night, the air was cold and smelled of antiseptic. My heels echoed against the tiled floor as I followed the nurse down the corridor. My heart wasn't racing. Strangely, it was calm. I had spent years imagining how this moment might feel, how I'd react when I finally saw them again. My parents, lying in those hospital beds. But the truth was, I felt almost nothing. Maybe exhaustion, maybe closure taking its first breath. The nurse stopped at the door. "They're both stable now," she said softly, "but still weak." I nodded, thanking her, and took a slow breath before pushing the door open. Inside, the light was dim. My father lay on the right side, an oxygen tube beneath his nose. His hair was thinner than I remembered, his once intimidating frame now fragile under the white sheets. My mother was next to him, her hands folded, eyes closed, face pale. For a moment, I just stood there, looking at them. The people who had thrown me out like a stranger, who had let me wander through nights with nowhere to sleep, who had watched me walk away carrying my entire life in a single suitcase. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive. I wasn't even sure if I should. I pulled a chair close to my father's bed. The beeping of the monitor was steady, like a quiet reminder that time still moved forward, no matter what we did to one another. "Laura?" His voice cracked the silence, barely more than a whisper. His eyelids fluttered open, and for a second confusion crossed his face. Then recognition. "You came." "I did," I said quietly, my voice steady. My mother stirred and opened her eyes. When she saw me, her lips trembled. "Oh my God. Laura," she breathed, her hand reaching out weakly. "I thought you wouldn't come?" I finished her sentence for her. "You're right. I almost didn't." There was silence again, the kind that carried years of unspoken pain, regret, and distance. I sat still, letting them sit with the weight of their own choices. "I'm sorry," my father said after a long moment. His voice was hoarse, but it carried a sincerity I hadn't heard before. We were wrong. So wrong. We didn't know what we were doing." I wanted to say something sharp, something that would remind him of the night he called me a disgrace, of the way my mother turned her back when I begged them to understand. But instead I said quietly, "You knew. You just didn't care." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Laura, please." "No, Mom, you both made your choice. You didn't just throw me out of the house. You erased me from the family. You let me suffer when you could have helped. You told me I wasn't welcome. And now, suddenly, you're sorry because you found out who the baby's father was?" My father's lips trembled. "We didn't know he was—" "Your business partner," I interrupted. "Yes, I know. And the funny thing is, you didn't care when it was just me. But when your reputation, your money, your name got involved, suddenly you found your hearts again." Neither of them spoke. The silence in the room grew heavier. My revenge had never been about destroying them. It was about letting them face themselves. Seeing their pride crumble, their illusions break, their power dissolve into helplessness. That was enough. "I didn't come here to hurt you," I said finally. "I came because I needed to see you one last time, as the people you really are, not as the parents I once imagined you to be." My mother sobbed quietly. "Laura, please don't go. Let us make this right. We've lost everything. Your father's business collapsed. People left us. The house is gone. We have nothing now." I turned toward her slowly. "You think losing money is punishment?" I said, my voice calm but cold. "I lost years. I lost peace. I lost trust. I lost the simple right to be loved by my own parents. You don't get to fix that with apologies." Her tears came harder, but I didn't move to comfort her. For years I had cried too, alone, in tiny apartments, while working through exhaustion, while feeding my baby on sleepless nights. Those tears were the price of their pride. Still, a small part of me, some old version of myself, felt something stir. Maybe pity, maybe forgiveness trying to whisper from somewhere deep. I stood up. "I'll cover your hospital bills," I said. "You don't have to worry about that. But I won't be back. Not soon." My father closed his eyes, a single tear sliding down his cheek. "You're a better person than we ever were," he said quietly. "We don't deserve you." I paused at the door, looking back at them. "You're right," I said. "But I learned something from you both. What not to become." And then I walked out. That night, I drove home in silence. The road lights blurred as I blinked away tears I hadn't realized were there. It wasn't joy or sadness, it was release. I had finally faced them, and in doing so, I had freed myself. When I got home, my daughter Emily ran to the door. Her little arms wrapped around my legs as she said, "Mommy, you're home." I knelt down and hugged her tightly. "Yes, baby, I'm home." Later, after putting her to bed, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city lights shimmered outside, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about payback or cruelty. It was about balance. It was about taking back control over the parts of your life others tried to steal from you. I didn't ruin my parents' lives. They did that themselves. All I did was show them a mirror. Over the next few weeks, their situation became public. My father's company faced legal trouble, ironically, with my law firm representing the opposing side. I didn't plan it that way. Fate did. The contracts, the evidence, the witnesses, they all came to me through professional channels. I handled the case ethically, but I didn't step back either. My job was to uphold justice, and that included letting truth surface. During one of the hearings, my father saw me across the courtroom. Our eyes met for a brief second, and in that moment, everything unspoken passed between us. The anger, the guilt, the understanding that what goes around truly does come around. He didn't say a word. Neither did I, but I could see it in his eyes. He finally understood. After the verdict, which didn't go in his favor, I left quietly. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate. It was simply closure. Back at my office, my colleagues congratulated me, unaware of the personal storm behind that case. I smiled politely, thanked them, and retreated into my office. There, I closed the door, took a deep breath, and looked at the framed picture of Emily on my desk. This, her smile, her innocence, Her future was what truly mattered. Not revenge, not pride, just peace. Weeks later, I received a letter. It was from my mother. The handwriting was shaky and the words were full of sorrow. She said they had sold the last of their possessions and were living in a small rented home. She wrote that they thought of me every day and prayed I was happy. I read it once, folded it, and placed it in a drawer. I didn't write back. Not because I hated them anymore, but because there was nothing left to say. Some stories don't need an ending. They just fade into lessons. And mine had become a quiet one. That sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or cruel. It's simply living better, freer, calmer than those who once tried to break you. As time passed, I found love again. Not the kind that rescues you, but the kind that meets you where you are. Someone who saw me for who I'd become, not what I'd been through. Together we built something stable, something gentle. Emily grew up surrounded by warmth and laughter, and I never spoke badly about my parents in front of her. I wanted her to know compassion, even when the world wasn't kind. Years later, she asked me once, "Mommy, do you have grandparents?" I paused before answering. "I used to," I said softly. "But sometimes family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who stands by you." She smiled, not fully understanding yet, and hugged me. And as I held her, I realized that my revenge had come full circle. Not through anger, not through punishment, but through peace. I had become everything they said I'd never be. Strong, independent, kind, and unbreakable. I wasn't the disgrace they claimed. I was their reflection of regret. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. Life can be cruel and people can be thoughtless, but your calm, your strength, your choice to rise instead of rage, that's your quiet revenge. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there might need to hear that even in betrayal, there can be peace. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to My Calm Revenge, where every story reminds you that dignity and patience are the sharpest forms of justice. Months after the court case ended, the world seemed to return to its quiet rhythm. The city that once felt so heavy with memories now became a place of calm movement for me. A balance between work, motherhood, and slow healing. Yet, even as life went on, the echoes of my past lingered like a low hum beneath everything I did. It was strange, the way pain fades but never quite disappears. Some mornings I would wake up early, make coffee, watch Emily sleep, and suddenly remember that night, standing in the rain outside my parents' home with a suitcase in one hand and my law degree in the other. I could still hear my father's voice shouting, "You're not welcome here," and my mother's silence that hurt more than words ever could. But those memories no longer broke me. They just reminded me how far I had come. By then, Emily was almost 5. She was growing fast, sharp, and curious, always asking questions about everything. I loved our evenings together. She'd sit on the couch drawing while I finished reviewing case files. It was an ordinary life, simple but peaceful. That peace had been my quiet revenge all along. Then one evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone buzzed. The caller ID made my heart tighten. It was my mother. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. The last letter she sent was the one I never replied to. I let the phone ring twice before answering. "Hello?" "Laura." Her voice cracked immediately. "It's your father. He's very sick. The doctors say it's not good this time." There was a pause, a space filled with all the years we'd lost. I took a slow breath. "What hospital?" I asked finally. When I arrived, she was waiting outside his room, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The woman who once carried herself with perfect posture and cold authority now seemed fragile, almost fading into the white walls. Her hair was streaked with gray, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for me. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I'm not here for thanks," I replied gently. "Just tell me what's happening." She explained in a halting voice that my father's condition had worsened. Liver failure from years of stress and poor health. The doctors had done what they could, but there wasn't much time left. I stood by the doorway for a long moment before walking in. The man lying on the bed barely resembled my father. The proud, sharp-tongued man who once decided who belonged and who didn't now looked frail, his skin pale, his eyes half open. When he saw me, a faint smile flickered. "You came," he whispered. "Yes," I said quietly, pulling a chair closer. "I came." For a while we just sat there. There were no speeches, no dramatics, just the slow ticking of time between two people who had once been strangers under the same roof. "I've had a lot of time to think," he said finally. His voice was weak, but his tone carried something real. "About everything. About you. About what I did." I didn't interrupt. I just let him speak. "I thought I was protecting our family name," he continued. "I thought I was doing the right thing, keeping order, discipline. But all I did was destroy the only good thing we had left. You." I felt something in my chest shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something close to understanding. Sometimes even the people who hurt you the most don't realize the damage until it's too late. "I wanted to tell you that I'm proud of you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I read about your cases. You fight for people who don't have anyone. You're everything I never was." I swallowed hard. "You didn't need to wait this long to tell me that." "I know." He tried to smile, but it faltered. "I was stubborn. And afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that you'd turn out better than me," he said, closing his eyes. "And you did." The silence after that felt heavy but gentle. I sat beside him until he drifted into sleep. My mother stood quietly in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. That night he passed away, peacefully. The doctors said he went without pain. At the funeral, only a few people came. The man who once had dozens of business associates and a reputation in the city now had only a small handful of mourners. I stood in the back, holding Emily's hand, watching the casket being lowered into the ground. My mother stood beside me, tears streaming down her face. When it was over, she turned to me and said, "I don't expect forgiveness, Laura. I just hope someday you'll remember us with something other than anger." I looked at her for a long moment. "I already do," I said softly. "But I also remember the truth." She nodded, understanding. And maybe that was enough. After the funeral, I offered to drive her home. She hesitated, surprised but accepted. The drive was quiet. She told me bits about her life since losing the house, how she worked part-time at a small community center, how she rented a modest apartment nearby. When we reached her place, she turned to me. "You've become so strong," she said. "I wish I'd been more like you." I smiled faintly. "You still can be." She laughed quietly, a sad, tired sound. "Maybe it's too late for me." "It's never too late to be kind," I said. "Even to yourself." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Would you come visit sometimes? Just talk?" I hesitated. I thought about all the years of distance, all the pain, but then I looked at Emily in the back seat, humming softly, unaware of the weight in the air. And I realized something. Revenge might bring balance, but compassion brings peace. "I'll try," I said finally. And I meant it. Weeks passed. I began visiting her occasionally, short visits at first. We talked about simple things, Emily's school, my work, recipes, books. Slowly, without forcing it, we rebuilt something fragile but real. It wasn't the same as before. It was gentler, quieter, built not on obligation, but on understanding. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at Emily with a mix of joy and regret in her eyes. She never said it, but I knew she saw in my daughter the second chance she wished she'd given me. One day, she brought out an old photo album, the kind with yellowed pages and cracked edges. "I found this," she said softly. "Thought you might want to see." We flipped through it together. There were pictures of my childhood, birthdays, family picnics, holidays, and then the gap, the years they had erased me from. The blank spaces told their own story. I didn't feel pain as I looked at them, just acceptance. Some pages in life will always be missing, and that's okay. Later that night, after putting Emily to bed, I sat by the window again, the city lights stretching out in the distance. I thought about how much had changed, not just in my life, but in me. The revenge that once fueled me had turned into something quieter, wiser. It wasn't about watching them suffer anymore. It was about proving, to myself, that I could survive without bitterness. That I could build a life so peaceful that even the ghosts of my past couldn't disturb it. Sometimes victory doesn't roar. It whispers. It whispers in every morning you wake up unafraid, in every night you sleep without resentment, in every choice you make to rise above instead of sink below. My father's last words stayed with me. You're everything I never was. For a long time, I didn't know how to feel about that. But now I do. I've learned that being better than someone who hurt you isn't arrogance, it's healing. Months later, I was invited to give a talk at a local university about women in law. I spoke about resilience, about navigating judgment and failure, about turning pain into power. When the session ended, a young woman came up to me. She said, "Your story gave me courage. My parents disowned me when I chose my own path, and I thought I was alone." I smiled gently and said, "You're not. Sometimes we lose people to find ourselves." That night, walking back to my car, I looked up at the sky. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking away from anything. I was walking towards something. Peace, purpose, self-respect. That was my calm revenge, not through anger, but through grace. And if you've listened all the way through, I want you to take this with you. Life doesn't always give closure in the way we expect. Sometimes the apology never comes. Sometimes justice looks nothing like revenge. But when you stand tall in your own story, when you rebuild without bitterness, you've already won. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If my story touched you or reminded you that strength can exist quietly, then I hope you'll share it with someone who needs to hear it too. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my Calm Revenge. Because sometimes the calmest voices carry the most powerful stories.